Welcome. This video serves to introduce you to our website as a major tool for you to use while you accomplish your research at the RSC. Our website was designed to serve you and aid you with your interactions with the RSC staff, your PI, and other researchers at the center. When you first access the RSC website, you will see our homepage. The homepage is designed to give you current information about special events and issues that you will encounter while working at our facility. New equipment that we have recently installed and upgrades to equipment will be displayed, as well as interesting news about research that has been accomplished within the facility. You will notice that the homepage features a menu bar that will lead you to major portions of the website. The first menu item you will want to click on is the User Panel tab, which will initiate the process of logging into the website so that one can see the full functionality of the site. When you reach the login screen, you will enter in your GatorLink username and password to proceed. I am signed up for dual authentication, so I get a prompt to use that service. Once logged in, the user panel is visible. The user panel is a custom panel that is designed to inform a user of all aspects of their work at the RSC. The most prominent feature of the user panel is a table of activities to aid you in monitoring your daily work at the facility. The first item you will see at the top of the table is the Work Plans section. This section will display the status of any work plans and work plan approvals that a user may have submitted, and it may indicate that the work plan is waiting PI or waiting staff approval. Once approved, it will disappear. The next section is for PI requests. If a prospective user of the facility wishes to access a PI's funding source, then the status of that request will be indicated here. The Open Equipment Use and Adjustments section will inform a user of the progress of any adjustments in usage time on instruments at the facility. This section reflects corrections in the usage due to specific problems with equipment or operations that should not be charged to the user's funding source. The Open Transaction Disputes section will indicate the status of a researcher's request to alter a bill or invoice that has been received from the facility. A researcher can keep close tabs on these disputes by watching these sections. The next section is the open service requests that have been submitted by researchers for staff to do work for their project. The requester can monitor the status of the service request by following the line over and clicking on the View link to take a look at the staff's latest progress update. When the service is complete, the staff member doing the work will close the request and a service charge will be generated. In the next section, Open Inquiries, the status of general inquiries made by a researcher to staff and administration will be indicated. Once again, clicking on the View link will show you the latest updates by staff. Now we enter the Training section of the user panel. The first training section indicates user requests for training that has not been scheduled. If a user requests training on an instrument that is not on any set schedule and has the required approval of their PI, then it will appear in this section. Staff monitors this section closely and will either create a training, select an existing training, or communicate with the requester before removing it from the list. The color-coded numbers, by the way, indicate the number of days since the request was made or updated. The next training section will indicate a researcher's scheduled trainings. Once a training request in the above section is approved and scheduled, that request will move to this section. This section also indicates instrumentation training that appears on our regular training calendar. We call these sessions scheduled trainings and are usually on instruments that are in high demand, and training would not be possible if not scheduled weeks to months in advance. A user may add themselves to the roster of one of these training sessions by going through the sign-up process and acquiring the approval of their PI. Exactly how to accomplish this will be covered a little later. The Recent Transactions tab can be expanded to indicate a running chronology of the researcher's billable use of the facility. The next few tabs are designed to assist a user of the facility with their daily work. You will find the Active Tummy Login section, which will have a list of equipment that a researcher is currently logged into. Regrettably, for users, the Tool Logout button will only work for staff. The reservations for today's section includes all the reservations on instruments that a researcher has made throughout the day. It will indicate the anticipated login time and the stated logout time. If the reservation is sometime soon and has not yet started, pressing the cancel link will take you through the process of removing the reservation from the list. Once the reservation start time has passed, then the reservation line will have a stop, edit, and cancel button to allow a researcher to manage their reservations more accurately. If the stop button is pressed, then the reservation end time will be set to that moment in time. If the reservation edit button is pressed before the reservation starts, then beginning and end times can be edited. Once a created reservation start time has passed, then only the end time can be edited. If a reservation is canceled after it starts, then a note must be left in the dialog box to indicate a legitimate reason for the reservation to be canceled and not charged for. The future reservation section is formatted just as the current reservation section, indicating reservations occurring on days in the future. These reservations can be edited just as reservations in the previous section. What you've seen here, of course, is my staff user panel, which not only monitors my activities, but all the other researchers' activities as well. Your user panel will have a lot less information, as it only reflects your current activity. To the left of the user panel is the main user menu. This menu is custom configured to your status within the facility. The first section, Prerequisite Status, has menu items for you to monitor the various prerequisites that are required for access to the facility and subsequent access to instrumentation and service. The first item, for equipment use, lists all the prereqs that you must meet before access to the facility and request for training can be submitted, as well as the status of the user's progress towards fulfilling them. If you click on the For Training Sessions item, you'll see a list of instrumentation, which will provide you with a link to the prerequisites required for training on each instrument. The only prerequisites for having service provided is a funding source. The next group in the menu is the Funds and Billing section. This section is also customized to the status of the user. It provides you links to finding out the status and expiration times of your currently active funding sources and the ability to request new funding sources. Click on the menu items and follow the directions to set up and initiate new funding sources. The third and fourth items on the list allow you to keep track of the activities pertaining to your funding sources and the transactions charged to each of your funding sources. The third grouping allows you to make and monitor reservations on instruments. You can keep track of and monitor future reservations, see a list of all current and past reservations, or simply fill out a quick form to create a reservation on the spot. We will cover an alternate means of making a reservation when we are discussing the characteristics of a dedicated equipment webpage. The fourth grouping contains all the information you need to monitor, set up, and keep up to date your instrument training. By clicking on the first menu item in this group, you can see the current status of all the trainings you have ever had at the RSC, indicating the date you were trained and any expiration dates if present. One method of setting up a training session is to click on the second item, Training Topics, which will provide you with a complete list of all of our instruments and any training sessions that might be scheduled for you to access in the future. The RSC offers 3 types of training. There's scheduled training, unscheduled training, and immediate training. Scheduled training has been arranged on a calendar weeks to months in advance to make sure that time is available for the training. This is especially important for instrumentation that has a high volume of users and the amount of time available for training is limited. Unscheduled training is the type of training on equipment that has a lower demand, and arranging blocks of time for that training is less difficult. Immediate training is available for a user's emergency need for training when research time is limited. Immediate training costs are approximately twice the cost of scheduled and unscheduled training, and although there may be some time savings, there also may not be, as we try to schedule all trainings as quickly as we possibly can. It is wise to consult with your PI first to make sure that the extra cost is known and approved. If you click on the Training Topics link, a list of all of our instruments will appear, with a link to show training sessions. When that link is pressed, either a list of scheduled training sessions will appear, or a link to signing up for either of the unscheduled training types. The next item, Training Calendar, will bring up a Google Calendar displaying all of the scheduled trainings as far as 6 months in the future. A brief list of training sessions spread throughout the day can be seen on any given date. If you press the small RSC logo in the upper right corner of the calendar date field, a detailed drop-down list of all the trainings for that day will appear and give you a link to initiate the process of signing up for training sessions scheduled that day. This calendar is handy because it allows you to look ahead for desired training sessions and see how long one would have to wait for the next available training. When a researcher initiates a request for training, no matter what type it is, it must be approved by the PI. To keep from overtaxing the PI with multiple individual training requests, a researcher has the ability to add training requests to a single shopping cart and then go to the last item on the training list and finish the cart up, hence sending all requests at once so the PI will only receive one email to approve a list of trainings. The Work Plan section simply allows you to manage and update your overall work plan and have it submitted for review. In the Service section is the Request Service link, which will take a researcher through the process of requesting staff service. And that pretty much concludes discussion of the left menu. So now let's go to the top menu tab. If one were to click on the How To tab, it would lead you to a page describing in detail the entire process for becoming a user of the RSC, no matter what category of user one might fall into. Look at each item and follow the indicated flow for the easiest path to becoming a user. Naturally, if there are any questions at all, feel free to contact us for guidance. The next item over on the menu is the Equipments tab. By default, all of our instrumentation are categorized into specific groups. These groups can be expanded to see a list of tools that are included in that group. The list will include the tool name, which is also a link to a dedicated tool page, and an indication as to what the tool's current status is. That status could be available, or in use, or down. This, for example, is the film depositions category, take a look at the dedicated page for the e-beam evaporator PVD tool. The dedicated page for each individual tool will indicate its current status, what it costs to use, the ability to request service quote for that instrument, as well as its location, and the staff engineer that's primarily responsible for the instrument. There will also be a brief description of the instrument and its capabilities, as well as reference links to other information to enhance your knowledge about that tool. Some tools have a status section that indicates its present setup. You will also notice that the equipment page has its own menu bar. Remember earlier I mentioned that there was another path to requesting training, and the Training tab on the equipment's dedicated page takes you directly to a list of trainings in the future or links to request training. Remember earlier I also mentioned that you could find prerequisites for operating a piece of equipment. In the prerequisites section of the menu, you can also view the prerequisites for a tool on its dedicated page by clicking on prerequisites. If you click on the Calendar tab, a Google Calendar will be displayed that indicates all past and future reservations on the instrument, and of course the gaps in time that surround those reservations. A researcher can click on the small RSC logo to initiate a reservation creation routine. An online reservation creation form that is partially populated with this particular tool's name will pop up after one clicks on a start time. Complete the rest of the form with your funding source and end time and hit submit to create the reservation. The newly created reservation will now appear on the calendar, as well as your user panel. The next item, Contacts, will give you the contact information of all the staff members that can assist you with this particular tool. The Docs section is essentially the tool's library. At a minimum, it will contain an image of the tool, the standard operating procedure for the tool, but it also may contain other documentation like white papers, references, and calibration sheets for the instrument. The Status Log tab will show a running list of all status changes and notes pertaining to the tool. This list is very handy for getting a feel on how the equipment behaves and frequent issues and comments. That pretty much covers the common aspects of an instrument's web page. To return to the main user panel, you can select User Panel at the top of the page. The next item over from the Equipments tab is the Examples tab. This will lead you to a variety of current and past examples of research that has occurred at the building. The Policies and Forms tab will take you to a list of commonly used forms, guidelines, and standard operating procedures for one to use in the daily use of the service center. Clicking on the Daily Work Plan form will lead to a web-based form that can be filled out and submitted to fulfill the requirements for approval of work to be carried out in the facility on a daily basis. It is critically important that this form be submitted at the very least before 3 o'clock the day before the planned use of the facility. Planning days in advance is appreciated. The complete staff of the RSC meets every day at 4 o'clock to review and approve the work plans for the next and succeeding days. After this approval process, all researchers who have submitted a plan will get a notification as to whether their plan has been approved, needs to be altered, or has been denied. A researcher that wishes to drop samples off at this facility to have staff inspect or provide service must fill out a sample drop-off form, print it, and place it in a Ziploc bag along with the sample before bringing it to the facility. The user should also email the sample drop-off form to the RSC at rscinfo@mail.ufl.edu so that the service-providing staff member has a heads up and can contact the researcher for information as needed. There are some dedicated forms and documents related to all aspects of our COVID-19 response, and these should be reviewed in detail by all users and their PIs. The COVID-19 Safety Acknowledgement Form should be filled out after completely reading our RSC COVID-19 related SOP. That can be found at the bottom of this list. The PI Activity Resumption Form is filled out by the PI, indicating that the researcher has been approved to restart and which research assistants and projects are allowed back on campus. The next form, our RSC After Hours Request Form, will be filled out by experienced researchers that have been working in this facility for a long enough time to develop an excellent track record of safety and compliance with our rules and regulations. These are to be emailed to staff, and staff will individually review the application and approve or deny the request. The RSC Key Fob Request Form will be filled out and submitted after completion of safety training so that staff can make and assign a security badge. At the bottom of the Forms section is a Materials Request Form. Remember from your general safety training slide presentation that a user is required to submit this form for approval anytime they are bringing a hazardous material into the building that is not on our standard inventory. At the bottom of the page, in the Policies section, is our General Standard Operating Procedures and Building Orientation Guide for users. These are to reference at any time. In the Safety tab, you will find that there is some redundancy on some of the items as they appear also in the Policy and Forms tab. The first link will lead you to a list of all of our stock chemicals. Before you request to bring a new material into the building, you should check here to see that we do not already have it in the building, or whether or not we have a material that is an acceptable replacement for that chemical that you wish to use in the building. Make sure you review your negligence guidelines, as in many cases, blatant disregard of our standard operating procedures could very well incur great costs to your PI. Before we go into the RSC Safety and Operations Guidelines, I want to point out that there is guidance under this menu for best safe practices for work on campus after normal business hours. And at the very bottom of the page is a complete list of the safety data sheets of all of the materials that we have in the building. Now let's take a look and quick overview of the RSC Safety and Operation Guidelines. By looking at the table of contents, one can see the different sections of this reference guide. As you go through the process of becoming a user of the facility, this guide will aid you in navigating the process and remind you of our requirements. Much of this information has already been covered in previous training, and this guide's primary function is to jog your memory and give you a bit of extra background information. Please read it in your own time. The final tab on the menu bar is our Contacts page, where you can find our building address, post office box number, our main telephone number and fax number, and our ever important general email box. It is always wise to send all correspondence to the RSC to our general email box, rscinfo@mail.ufl.edu, because it is constantly monitored by all staff. At the top of the menu, there's a link for you to submit a general question to all RSC staff members, and the most appropriate person will answer that question for you. Click on the staff item, and you will see a list of all staff members and their contact information. If you need guidance as to how to get to the building and where to park, there is a link for that as well. This concludes your orientation to the RSC website. As you can see, it is a very powerful tool and resource for you to use while you are doing research in the facility. As always, if you have any questions about the navigation of the website and the operation and administration of the Research Service Center as a whole, feel free to contact me or any of the staff members at any time. Once again, this is Al Ogden, and welcome to our facility.